I'm 83 years old, and I'm about to tell you about the greatest moral failure of my life. Not a failure of action, but a failure of courage. The courage to protect something pure from a world that would have destroyed it for profit. My name is Penhaligon, and in the summer of 1986, my 10-year-old son Leo, profoundly autistic, non-verbal, locked in a world of routines and sensory terror, found a friend in the Olympic Peninsula rainforest. Not another child, not a therapist or a specially trained dog, a juvenile Bigfoot. For 5 months I documented their friendship on a Betamax camcorder, hours of footage showing my son, who couldn't speak, teaching sign language to a creature that wasn't supposed to exist, hours of a 5-foot-tall cryptid bringing Leo gifts, providing deep pressure therapy when he was overwhelmed, teaching him to replant trees and read the forest. I had proof, undeniable scientific proof that would have made me famous, wealthy, guaranteed tenure at any university in the world. Proof that my son wasn't just connecting with something impossible, but that something impossible had chosen to love him back. And I locked it away, hid it for 37 years. Because the moment I understood what releasing that footage would mean, military containment, dissection, the destruction of the only being who ever truly understood my boy, I knew I could never let the world see it. This is the story of the friendship that saved my son's life, and the choice that's haunted me every day since. The story of what we lose when we choose documentation over protection, proof over love. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from today. Do you have someone in your life who exists outside the ordinary? Someone the world doesn't quite understand? Because this story is about what we owe to those rare, impossible connections that change everything. This channel exists for people like you. Each episode brings a new character, a new encounter, a new perspective on what might be watching from the shadows. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Now let's back to the story. My wife Margaret died in March of 1985. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed too late. Gone within 8 months. She was 34 years old and she left me with a 10-year-old son I didn't understand and didn't know how to help. Leo was diagnosed with severe autism at age 3. Non-verbal, highly sensitive to sound and touch, living in a world of rigid routines that, if disrupted, would send him into meltdowns that could last hours. Margaret had been his interpreter, his advocate, his entire support system. She knew which foods he'd eat, which textures he could tolerate, which sounds would trigger him. She'd developed a visual schedule system, learned basic sign language to communicate with him, spent years building a careful structure around his needs. When she died, that structure collapsed. I was a linguist, a professor at University of Washington, specializing in dead languages, Celtic etymology, linguistic evolution. I could read Old Irish, translate Proto-Indo-European, trace language families back thousands of years, but I couldn't communicate with my own son. The months after Margaret's death were hell. Leo's meltdowns increased in frequency and intensity. He stopped sleeping through the night. He refused most foods. He'd rock in corners for hours, hands over his ears, making distressed vocalizations that broke my heart because I didn't know what they meant. The school district recommended institutionalization. He needs specialized care, they said. 24-hour supervision, trained staff. You can't provide that alone. They meant well, but what I heard was, you're failing him. You're not enough. Give him to strangers who'll sedate him and warehouse him until he's no longer your problem. I couldn't do it. Margaret would have fought them with everything she had, so I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I took a leave of absence from the university, withdrew what savings we had, and found a rental property as far from Seattle as I could get while staying in Washington State. A cabin on the Olympic Peninsula, deep in the whole rainforest, accessible only by a logging road that barely qualified as drivable. No neighbors, no school district, no well-meaning professionals telling me I was failing my son. Just silence, rain, and the desperate hope that isolation would be better than the constant sensory assault of the city. The cabin was a mistake from the start. The constant rain, 180 inches a year in the Ho, created a relentless white noise that I thought would be soothing. Instead, it made Leo more anxious. The drumming on the metal roof, the dripping from the eaves, the way sound echoed differently in the damp air. It was all wrong. Leo's routines, carefully built over years, were shattered. His visual schedules didn't work in the new space. The foods we'd brought tasted different when cooked on a wood stove instead of an electric range. Even the light was wrong, filtered through moss and ancient trees instead of streaming through familiar windows. He stopped eating almost entirely, would spend entire days rocking in the corner, making keening sounds that I'd learned meant he was in distress, but couldn't be comforted. I was failing him worse than I'd failed him in Seattle. At least there, he'd had his routines, his familiar spaces, even if I didn't understand them. Here I'd stripped away everything stable and replaced it with chaos disguised as peace. By July, I was seriously considering going back, admitting defeat. Maybe the school district was right. Maybe he did need institutional care. Maybe love wasn't enough when you didn't understand the language of the person you loved. That's when Leo started wandering into the forest. At first I'd panic and drag him back, terrified he'd get lost in the endless maze of moss-covered Sitka spruce and western hemlock. But he'd just wander out again the next day, drawn towards something I couldn't see or understand. Always to the same place, always to the same grove of ancient trees about a quarter mile from the cabin. I didn't know what he was looking for, didn't know that the forest was offering him exactly what I couldn't, a companion who spoke his language. On July 23, 1986, I followed Leo into the forest for the 5th time that week. He'd slipped out while I was making lunch, and I'd grabbed my jacket and rushed after him, calling his name uselessly. He never responded to verbal calls. The forest was dense, dripping with recent rain, the ground carpeted in sword ferns and moss that muffled every footstep. I could see Leo ahead of me, moving with surprising confidence through the undergrowth, following what seemed like an invisible path. He was heading toward the grove again. That cluster of old-growth Sitka spruce, their trunks so massive it would take 3 men to circle them, their canopy so dense that even the constant rain barely penetrated. I'd been there before, trying to understand what drew him. It was just trees, just ferns, just the same endless green and brown that covered every square mile of this rainforest. But to Leo, it was something else, something important. I reached the edge of the grove and stopped, peering through the ferns. Leo was in the center of a small glade, maybe 30 feet across, standing perfectly still. Leo was never still. His baseline was constant motion, rocking, hand-flapping, pacing. Stillness meant something was very wrong or very right. I moved closer, staying hidden behind a massive cedar trunk, and that's when I saw who he was looking at. There was a figure standing 10 feet from my son, upright, bipedal, covered in reddish-brown fur that caught the filtered light. My first thought was bear, but the posture was wrong. Bears don't stand with their weight balanced evenly on 2 legs, hands, not paws, hanging relaxed at their sides. My second thought was person in a costume, but the movement was too fluid, too natural. And what person would be standing silently in the middle of nowhere, wearing a fur suit, staring at a 10-year-old boy? My third thought, the one I didn't want to accept. Impossible. The creature was young. I could tell from its size and proportions, maybe 5 feet tall, slender compared to the massive adults described in folklore. Its fur was a rich reddish brown, darker along the spine, lighter on the chest and hands. The face was the thing that froze me. Not a bear's face. Not an ape's face, though it shared features with both. A heavy brow ridge, deep-set eyes, a flat nose with flared nostrils. But the eyes themselves, dark brown, intelligent, focused on Leo with unmistakable awareness. This was not an animal looking at potential prey. This was a person looking at another person with curiosity, caution, and something approaching recognition. The creature and Leo stood perfectly still, maybe 8 feet apart, just observing each other. Then Leo did something I'd never seen him do with another human being. He smiled. My hand went to the hunting knife on my belt, not a weapon I'd ever used, but something I'd brought for emergencies. My entire body screamed to run forward, grab Leo, get him away from this thing that could probably kill him with one swipe. But I didn't move, because Leo was smiling, and the creature, I could see its face clearly now, was making an expression that looked disturbingly like a smile in return. The corners of its mouth turned up, the eyes crinkled slightly, a universally readable expression of friendly intent. They weren't threatened by each other. They were meeting. I watched, paralyzed by indecision, as Leo took one step forward. The creature didn't retreat, didn't advance, just watched, waiting to see what Leo would do. Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out something he always carried, a smooth river stone Margaret had given him years ago, one of his comfort objects. He held it out. The creature looked at the stone, then at Leo. It tilted its head, a gesture so human it made my chest ache, and slowly reached out one massive hand. Its fingers were thick, covered in the same reddish fur, but the hand was structurally human, 4 fingers and an opposable thumb, capable of precision grip. The creature took the stone with surprising delicacy, examined it, then made a soft sound. Not a growl, not a grunt. A vocalization that sounded almost like a question. Leo made a sound back, one of his happy sounds, the ones he made when something felt right in his world. The creature tucked the stone into the thick fur on its chest. Apparently, there were natural pockets or folds in the fur, and reached down to the forest floor. It picked up something and held it out to Leo, a shed elk antler, maybe 8 inches long, worn smooth by weather. Leo took it, ran his fingers over the surface, and made another happy sound. They'd just exchanged gifts. I stood behind that cedar tree, watching my non-verbal, profoundly autistic son engage in reciprocal social interaction with a creature that wasn't supposed to exist, and I didn't know whether to cry or run or simply accept that everything I thought I understood about the world was wrong. The creature made another sound, softer this time, and sat down, cross-legged on the forest floor. The posture was so casual, so deliberate, clearly an invitation. Leo sat down across from it, maybe 6 feet of distance between them, and they just sat together. Two beings existing in the same space, comfortable in the silence. That's when I understood. They'd already met. This wasn't the first time. Leo had been coming here for days, maybe weeks, building this friendship while I'd been too wrapped up in my own panic to see what was happening. My son had found someone, something that understood him in ways I never could, and I had absolutely no idea what to do about it. I retreated to the cabin in a state of shock, leaving Leo in the grove. Every parental instinct screamed that I was making a terrible mistake, but Leo was clearly safe, clearly happy, and my presence would only disrupt whatever was happening. I spent 2 hours pacing the cabin trying to process what I'd seen, a juvenile Bigfoot, real, not folklore, not hoax, not misidentified bear. A living, breathing creature that walked upright, used tools, engaged in gift exchange, and had somehow formed a bond with my son. When Leo returned at dusk, walking through the cabin door with that elk antler clutched in his hands, he was calmer than I'd seen him in months. He went directly to his corner, arranged the antler in a specific position, and rocked gently, not in distress, but in contentment. That night, he slept through for the first time since Margaret died. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed to see this again, needed to understand what was happening, not just for scientific curiosity, though God knows that was there, but because whatever this creature was doing, it was helping my son in ways I'd completely failed to. I grabbed my old Betamax camcorder, a bulky relic I'd bought to document Leo's early childhood and barely used. If I was going to observe this, I needed documentation, evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I followed Leo to the grove, staying well hidden this time, and set up behind a fallen log covered in moss. The camcorder was heavy, awkward, but the telephoto lens let me capture details from 50 feet away. The creature was already there, waiting. It stood when Leo appeared, made a soft vocalization that I'd come to recognize as greeting. Leo made his happy sound in return and sat in the same spot as yesterday. The creature sat across from him and reached into its fur, pulling out Leo's river stone. It held the stone out, clearly returning it. Leo took it, examined it, then offered it back. They were playing a game, taking turns holding the object, a basic form of social interaction that therapists had tried for years to teach Leo with other children. It had never worked. But here, in this moss-covered glade, with this impossible creature, Leo understood the game perfectly. Over the next week, I documented everything. I built a camouflage blind from fallen branches and moss, positioning it where I could film without being seen. The Betamax tapes piled up, 30 minutes per tape, dozens of tapes capturing hours of interaction. What I saw changed everything I thought I knew about intelligence, about communication, about what constitutes human behavior. The creature brought Leo gifts almost daily, never random, always things with interesting textures or patterns. Polished stones, pieces of bark with unusual shapes, once a perfect spiral shell from some ancient mollusk. Leo would examine each gift with intense focus, then carefully add it to a growing collection he kept in a hollow at the base of one of the massive Sitka spruce. The creature watched Leo's rituals, the way he had to arrange objects in specific patterns, the way he rocked when processing information, the way certain sounds made him cover his ears, and adapted its behavior accordingly. It moved quietly, avoided sudden movements, gave Leo space when he needed it. This was social intelligence theory of mind, understanding that Leo's needs were different and adjusting behavior to accommodate them. The real breakthrough came on August 3rd. I have it on tape, time-stamped, undeniable. Leo was having a difficult morning. A blue jay had been screeching near the cabin, and the sound had triggered him. He'd been in meltdown when he'd fled to the grove, hands over ears, keening, rocking violently. The creature was there, and I tensed, expecting it to flee from Leo's distress. Instead, it did something extraordinary. It sat down behind Leo, back to back, and leaned against him, providing deep pressure. Deep pressure therapy. The same technique Margaret had used, the same technique occupational therapists recommended. Firm, consistent pressure that helped regulate Leo's nervous system during sensory overload. The creature couldn't have known this from human training. It had observed Leo, recognized the pattern of distress, and responded with an intervention that actually worked. Within 5 minutes, Leo's keening stopped. His rocking slowed, his hands came down from his ears. They sat like that for 20 minutes, back to back, the creature providing exactly the support Leo needed without words, without explanation, just presence and pressure and patience. When Leo finally turned around, calm again, the creature made a soft sound and touched its own chest. Then it did something that made me drop the camcorder. It moved its hands in a deliberate pattern, fingers spread, moving downward in front of its chest. A sign, ASL for calm or peace. The creature was using sign language. I realized then that this wasn't new either. Leo had been teaching it. My son, who couldn't speak, who struggled with basic motor skills, who'd never successfully learned to button his own shirt, he'd been teaching a juvenile Bigfoot to sign. Over the next weeks, I documented them developing a shared language. Basic signs at first. Rain, wiggling fingers downward. Food, fingers to mouth. Wait, one hand raised, palm out. The creature's hands were different from human hands. Thicker fingers, different proportions, but fully capable of forming the shapes. It struggled with some signs, got the positioning wrong, and Leo would gently correct it, repositioning the creature's fingers until the sign was right. Leo was teaching, communicating, engaging in the kind of reciprocal social interaction that every therapist said he'd never achieve. And the creature was learning, making mistakes, self-correcting, demonstrating a capacity for language acquisition that challenged every definition of intelligence I'd ever studied. They had created their own world in that grove, a world where Leo's differences weren't deficits, where silence wasn't empty, where two outcasts, one human, one cryptid, had found exactly what they needed in each other. I sat behind my camouflage blind, filming it all, tears running down my face, understanding that I was documenting something that would change science forever, and beginning to suspect that changing science would destroy everything that mattered. If this story is touching something in you, if you know what it means to watch someone you love finally be understood, subscribe. These stories about connection across impossible boundaries, about love that transcends every category we've built, they matter. They need to be told. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because what happened next forced me to make the hardest choice of my life. Now, September 1986. By September, their friendship had deepened into something remarkable. They had routines now, patterns I could predict and document. The creature would arrive at the grove around mid-morning. It would wait, sitting against one of the massive spruce trunks until Leo appeared. They'd greet each other with sounds, the creature's soft rumble, Leo's happy vocalization, and then they'd begin their day together. Sometimes they'd sit in silence for hours, Leo arranging his collection of gifts, the creature watching with apparent fascination. Sometimes they'd walk together through the forest, the creature showing Leo things, mushrooms growing in specific patterns, the way moss indicated north, animal tracks that told stories. The signing had expanded dramatically. They had maybe 30 signs now, a functional vocabulary. Tree, water, friend. That last one made me sob the first time I filmed it, the creature tapping its chest, then reaching out to gently tap Leo's chest. Friend. In late September, something shifted. The creature brought its family. I was filming the usual interaction when I heard movement in the undergrowth. Two massive figures emerged from the forest, adults, easily 8 and 7 feet tall respectively, covered in the same reddish-brown fur, but darker, more imposing. My heart stopped. This was it. They'd discovered the human child interacting with their young. This was where it ended badly. But the juvenile made a series of sounds, complex vocalizations that were clearly communication, and gestured to Leo. The adults approached slowly, cautiously. They sat at the edge of the glade, maybe 20 feet away, and simply observed. The juvenile signed to Leo, "Wait." Then it walked over to the adults and they had what I can only describe as a conversation. Gestures, vocalizations, obvious exchange of information. After maybe 5 minutes, one of the adults, I assumed the mother based on slightly smaller size and more delicate features, approached Leo. She knelt down to his level, and I held my breath, finger on the camcorder's zoom, ready to drop everything and run if she showed any aggression. She reached out one massive hand and gently touched the top of Leo's head, a blessing, an acknowledgement. Then she signed, clumsily, clearly not as practiced as the juvenile, "Friend." She was approving the relationship, giving permission for it to continue. After that day, the interactions became even richer. The juvenile started teaching Leo skills, forestcraft that even I, with a year in the wilderness, didn't fully understand. I filmed them replanting saplings together. A windstorm had uprooted several young trees, and the creature showed Leo how to carefully reposition them, pack the soil around the roots, create support structures from fallen branches. It was environmental stewardship, teaching. passing on knowledge with clear pedagogical intent. Show, guide, correct, praise. Leo, who struggled to tie his shoes, learned to read root systems and soil moisture. His hands, usually clumsy with human tools, moved with surprising confidence when working with natural materials. The creature would bring food sometimes, berries, edible roots, once a piece of honeycomb still dripping with honey. It would show Leo which plants were safe, which were medicine, which were poison. And Leo would bring things from the cabin. He raided my supplies, bringing items he thought the creature would find interesting. A magnifying glass that fascinated it for an entire afternoon. A harmonica that produced sounds I hadn't known were possible, somewhere between music and their natural vocalizations. They were teaching each other. True reciprocal knowledge exchange. By October, their signing had evolved beyond basic nouns and simple requests. They were expressing abstract concepts. I captured Leo signing happy while pointing at the creature responding with a sign I didn't recognize, something the juvenile had invented or adapted from their own communication system that clearly meant the same thing. They developed combination signs. Rain friend, for the times when they sat together in the drizzle, comfortable in each other's presence. Tree home for the grove that had become their shared space. Most remarkably, the creature started signing about things that weren't present. Future concepts. Come tomorrow, with a gesture toward where the sun would be. Wait rain stop, predicting weather patterns. This was language as linguists define it. Displacement, the ability to communicate about things not immediately present. This was syntax, grammar, symbolic thought. I was filming the documentation of a second language-using species on Earth, and the world had no idea. The moment that broke me completely came on a grey October afternoon. I'd been having a bad day, anniversary of Margaret's diagnosis, memories I couldn't push away. I'd been short with Leo that morning, impatient in ways I hated myself for. Leo had fled to the grove, and I'd followed with the camera more out of routine than purpose. The creature took one look at Leo, at the tension in his body, the way he was rocking more intensely than usual, and made a questioning sound. Leo signed something. Not a sign I'd taught him, not one I recognized, but the creature understood. It reached out and pulled Leo close, wrapping massive arms around my son in what was unmistakably a hug. Leo, who couldn't tolerate most touch, who would shrink from embraces, melted into that hug like he'd been waiting for it his entire life. They sat like that for maybe 10 minutes, the creature holding Leo, making soft, rhythmic sounds that I recognized as soothing. Leo crying, actual tears, emotional release I'd never seen from him before. When they finally separated, Leo signed "Father" and made a gesture toward the cabin that clearly meant sadness or worry. The creature looked in the direction Leo indicated, toward where I was hidden, and I swear to God, it looked directly at the lens, like it knew I was there, had always known. It signed to Leo, "Father loves you." How did it know that sign? How did it understand the concept? Then it made a complex series of gestures I didn't understand, but Leo clearly did. Comfort, reassurance, the kind of emotional support I should have been providing but didn't know how to give. My son's best friend, his therapist, his teacher, his emotional support, it was all this creature. This juvenile Bigfoot, who had shown more understanding of Leo's needs in 4 months than I'd managed in 10 years. I turned off the camera and just cried behind my moss-covered blind, understanding how completely I'd failed as a father and how perfectly this impossible being had succeeded where I'd given up. On October 15th, 1986, I made a phone call that almost destroyed everything. I'd been watching the tapes, studying them with a linguist's eye, and the implications were staggering. This wasn't just a new species. This was a second linguistic species on Earth. Evidence that language, abstract thought, culture, teaching, all the things we claimed made us uniquely human, existed in another form. I needed expert verification, someone who could confirm I wasn't hallucinating, that the footage showed what I thought it showed. I called Dr. Richard Holloway, a primatologist I'd collaborated with years ago on a paper about gestural communication in great apes. I framed it as a hypothetical. "Richard, if someone had footage of an unknown great ape species in North America exhibiting sign language use and tool modification, what would be the protocol?" There was a long pause. "Where exactly is this footage, Arthur?" "Hypothetically. Hypothetically, that footage would be career-defining, Nobel Prize material. The university would want it authenticated immediately. Then, well, fish and wildlife would get involved. Probably military if there were national security implications. The specimen would need to be secured for study." My blood ran cold. "Secured how?" "Capture, sedation, transport to a secure facility. Standard protocol for unknown species, especially one that might pose a threat. And if the specimen resisted capture?" Another pause. "Lethal force would be authorized if necessary." "Arthur, where is this footage?" I hung up. I spent that night watching the tapes again with new eyes. Not as a scientist documenting discovery, but as a father understanding threat. If I released this footage, here's what would happen. Teams would descend on the Olympic Peninsula. Military, scientific, media. The grove would be swarmed. The creature would be hunted. Probably killed in self-defense when it tried to protect itself or its family. If they captured it alive, it would spend the rest of its life in a concrete enclosure, studied, tested, isolated from everything it knew. Leo would lose his friend, his teacher, the only being who'd ever truly understood him. And for what? So I could be famous. So science could dissect something beautiful and reduce it to data. I looked at the tapes, dozens of them now, hundreds of hours of footage, proof of everything, proof that would destroy everything. I packed them in a fireproof safe and locked them away, but the damage was already done. Richard Holloway was too curious, too ambitious to let it go. 2 weeks later, I saw the helicopters, Fish and Wildlife Survey, officially checking for old-growth preservation compliance, but I recognized the pattern. They were searching. Richard must have reported our conversation. They weren't sure what they were looking for, but they were looking. I found Leo in the grove, signing urgently with the creature. The juvenile was agitated, looking up at the sky, clearly distressed by the helicopter noise. "So you have to go," I said out loud, knowing it couldn't understand words but hoping my tone would convey meaning. "They're looking for you. It's not safe." The creature looked at me. The first time it had openly acknowledged my presence in months of observation. Those dark eyes met mine with unmistakable intelligence. It signed to Leo, "Hide, danger, go far." Leo signed back, "No, stay, friend." The creature touched Leo's face gently, then signed, "Come back, promise." Then it turned and ran into the forest with a speed that seemed impossible for something that size. The adults appeared moments later, collected the juvenile, and the whole family vanished into the endless green. Leo stood in the empty grove, signing "friend, friend, friend" over and over to no one, and I understood what I'd done. In trying to verify my discovery, I'd endangered them. My curiosity, my need for scientific validation, had brought the hunters. The helicopters searched for 3 days. They found nothing. The creatures knew the forest better than any human ever could. On the 4th day, they left. For 2 weeks after that, the grove was empty. Leo went there every day, sat in his spot, signed to the absence, and waited. He stopped eating again, stopped sleeping. The progress of the summer evaporated, and I watched my son retreat back into the isolated world he'd inhabited before. I did this. My phone call, my inability to just accept the gift without needing to verify it, validate it, turn it into something the scientific world would recognize. Then, on November 1st, Leo came running back to the cabin, making sounds I'd never heard before. Not distress, joy, pure joy. I followed him to the grove. The creature was there, thinner, more cautious, but there. It signed to Leo. "Danger gone?" Leo looked at me. Actually looked at me, made eye contact, something he almost never did, with a question in his eyes. I nodded. "They're gone. I won't tell anyone. I promise." I don't know if the creature understood my words, but it seemed to understand my intention. It approached Leo slowly and wrapped him in that embrace, and Leo made his happy sounds, and I stood there knowing I'd been given a second chance I absolutely didn't deserve. That evening, the creature did something unprecedented. It approached me. I was sitting on a log at the edge of the grove, watching Leo arrange his collection of gifts, when the juvenile walked over and sat beside me. We sat in silence for maybe 10 minutes. Then it reached into its fur and pulled out something. A small carved figure, maybe 3 inches tall, roughly shaped into a humanoid form. It had made this. Carved it with tools I'd never seen it use, shaped it with clear artistic intent. It placed the carving in my hand, then signed, "Father." It had made me a gift, was acknowledging my role, my relationship to Leo despite my mistakes. I started crying. "I'm sorry," I said. I could have gotten you killed. I didn't think about what it would mean." The creature made a soft sound and touched my shoulder. Then it signed something. "Protect Leo, both together." It understood. Understood that I'd been trying to process something impossible, that I'd made a mistake, and it was offering forgiveness contingent on a promise. "We both protect Leo. Together." I nodded, clutching that carved figure. "Together, I promise." The lesson was clear. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the harm. It means choosing to move forward with new understanding, new boundaries, new commitments to do better. I kept that carving on my desk for the next 37 years, a reminder of the promise I made and the price of breaking it. After the helicopter incident, I stopped filming, packed the camera away, focused on just being present. What I learned by watching, instead of documenting, changed everything I thought I knew about language. The creature and Leo communicated at a level far beyond the signs I could see. They had rhythm, timing, shared attention that required no words or gestures. They'd sit in silence and somehow coordinate complex activities, gathering specific plants, building structures from branches, creating patterns in the moss, without any visible signal. It was communication through pure presence, reading micro-expressions, body language, shared understanding built over hundreds of hours together. The lesson: words are the least important part of communication. Presence, attention, attunement, that's where real understanding happens. I watched the creature adapt its teaching style to Leo's learning patterns. It never tried to force Leo to learn like a typical child. Instead, it observed how Leo processed information and met him there. When teaching plant identification, it let Leo stim, rock, flap, repeat, while information integrated. It understood that what looked like not paying attention was actually Leo's way of processing. It created routines and rituals that gave Leo security. The same greeting, the same meeting spot, the same patterns that made the unpredictable forest feel safe. The lesson: difference isn't deficit. Leo didn't need to be fixed or normalized. He needed someone who would adapt to his way of being instead of demanding he adapt to theirs. That creature understood what I'd spent 10 years failing to grasp. Over the months, I realized their relationship was perfectly balanced. Not because they kept score, but because they were both genuinely invested in each other's well-being. Leo taught the creature signing, shared his gifts, showed it things from the human world. The creature taught Leo forestcraft, provided emotional support, protected him from his own overwhelm. Neither was the teacher or the student. They were both. Neither was the helper or the helped. They were both. True reciprocity, not transactional, but relational. Each giving what they had, receiving what they needed, trusting the balance would emerge naturally. The lesson: relationships work when both people are committed to the other's flourishing, not keeping score of who owes what. The creature lived with such elegant simplicity. It needed food, shelter, family, purpose. Nothing more. No possessions beyond what it could carry. No structures beyond what served immediate needs. No complexity for complexity's sake. I watched it teach Leo about sufficiency. This plant provides food, enough. This cave provides shelter, enough. This friend provides connection, enough. Meanwhile, I was drowning in complexity. Worried about insurance, university politics, Leo's future care, retirement planning. Systems built on systems, anxiety about things that hadn't happened yet and probably never would. The lesson: most of human complexity is solving problems we created by ignoring sufficiency. We've built elaborate systems to manage artificial scarcity when abundance is all around us. The creature existed entirely in the present moment, not worried about tomorrow, not dwelling on yesterday, just here now with Leo. When it rained, they sat in rain. When sun broke through the canopy, they sat in sun. When Leo needed silence, they sat in silence. When Leo needed movement, they moved. No agenda. No goal beyond being together, experiencing what was actually happening instead of being lost in what might happen or what had happened. I'd spent Leo's entire life planning for his future, worried about his development, grieving who he wasn't instead of seeing who he was. The creature just saw Leo, now, perfect exactly as he was in this moment. The lesson: presence is the foundation of love. Not planning for someone, not fixing someone, not grieving who they're not. Just being with who they are right now. November brought the first real cold. The rain turned to sleet, then to snow. Rare in the coastal rainforest, but not impossible. The creature's family appeared more frequently, often watching from the edges of the grove. I realized they were teaching the juvenile something, preparing it for something. Migration. They migrate. I'd been so caught up in documenting, in protecting, in processing the impossibility that I'd never considered. This couldn't last forever. They were wild creatures with their own biological imperatives, their own seasonal patterns. Leo was getting older too. He'd be 11 in December. He'd need to return to some kind of schooling eventually, some kind of structure beyond this isolated cabin. We were both running out of time. One grey afternoon in mid-November, the mother appeared in the grove while Leo and the juvenile were signing together. She made a complex vocalization, and the juvenile's whole body language changed. Sadness, reluctance. She signed to Leo, "Go soon. Sleep winter. Far mountain." Leo didn't understand at first. He signed back, "Come tomorrow." The creature shook its head, a learned gesture, clearly picked up from watching humans. It signed, "No. Go far. Sleep long. Maybe come back. Maybe. Not definitely. Not a promise it could keep." Leo looked at me, panic in his eyes, signing frantically, "No, go. Friend, stay, please. I had to explain, had to make him understand. They have to go, Leo. They have to migrate to survive the winter. It's not because they want to leave you, it's because they have to. But how do you explain biological imperative to a 10-year-old who just wants his friend to stay? The last 2 weeks of November, they were inseparable. The juvenile would arrive at dawn and stay until dusk. They'd sit pressed together, Leo leaning into that warm fur, both of them treasuring every remaining moment. The creature started bringing Leo on longer walks, showing him more of the forest, like it was trying to give him everything it could before leaving. It showed Leo its family's shelter, a complex structure woven from branches and moss, hidden in a ravine I'd never have found. An act of complete trust, revealing their home. It introduced Leo to its parent properly. The mother touched Leo's head again, made that cooing sound I'd learned meant affection. The father, massive, imposing, knelt down and let Leo touch his face, his hands, creating physical memory. They were saying goodbye. All of them knew it. On November 28th, the creature brought something to the grove I'd never seen before. A piece of cedar bark, carefully stripped and dried, with markings burned into it. Symbols. Not pictures exactly, but abstract designs that clearly meant something. The creature pointed to different marks, then to itself, to Leo, to the grove, to the sky. A map or a calendar, or both. A way of saying, this is where we'll be, this is when we'll return, this is how you find us again. It gave the bark to Leo, who clutched it like a lifeline. Then the creature pulled Leo close and pressed their foreheads together. That gesture of ultimate connection I'd seen in the tapes, but never in person. They stayed like that for a long time, and I filmed it. Couldn't help myself. This moment needed to be remembered. When they separated, the creature signed, "Love you. Come back. Promise, try." Not a guarantee, an intention. The best it could offer. Leo signed back, "Love you. Wait. Friend always." Then the creature did something it had never done before. It walked over to me, this shy juvenile that had avoided direct contact for months, and touched my hand. It signed, "Protect Leo. Teach Leo. Love Leo." Passing responsibility. Trusting me to do what it had done. See Leo, accept Leo, help Leo flourish. I nodded, unable to speak. The creature returned to Leo for one final embrace. Then it signed the gesture they'd invented together, the one that meant their specific friendship, their bond that existed outside language. And it walked away into the forest, looking back 3 times, each glance a promise and a goodbye. The family left on November 30th, 1986. I knew because Leo and I went to the grove that morning and found it empty in a way it hadn't been before. The structure they'd built together, a little shelter made of branches and ferns, had been dismantled. The collection of gifts Leo had arranged so carefully was gone, each item removed and carried away. Only one thing remained, a carving. Larger than the one the creature had given me, more detailed. It showed 2 figures, one clearly the juvenile Bigfoot, one clearly Leo. They were sitting back to back, the posture of comfort and support. Leo picked it up and made a sound I'd never heard before, a wail of grief so profound it didn't sound human. We stayed in the grove all day, waiting. Leo signed to empty air. "Come back, please, friend." At dusk, there was movement in the tree line. The juvenile appeared one last time, alone, violating whatever rules its family had set to say goodbye properly. It walked to Leo and knelt down. It touched Leo's face with both hands, a framing gesture like it was memorizing every detail. Then it made a sound, complex, musical, clearly language, but not one any human had documented. It was giving Leo its name, its real name, in its own language. Leo tried to repeat it, failed, tried again. The creature helped him, shaping his mouth with gentle fingers, teaching him one final thing. When Leo finally got it close enough, the creature made that chuckling sound I'd learned meant approval, pleasure. Then it pressed something into Leo's hand, a tuft of fur carefully removed from its own chest, tied with grass into a small bundle. A physical reminder, proof it had been real. It signed one last time, "Love you. Remember, always friend." Then it turned and ran, and this time it didn't look back. Leo stood in the grove, holding that tuft of fur, watching the forest where his friend had disappeared. He made his grief sound again, rocking now, hands flapping in distress. I moved to comfort him, but he pushed me away. He didn't want comfort, he wanted his friend. We walked back to the cabin in the growing dark, and Leo went directly to his corner, arranged the carving and the tuft of fur in a specific pattern, and began to rock in earnest. The winter of 1986 to 87 was the hardest of my life. Leo regressed. The progress of the summer vanished. He stopped eating most foods again, stopped sleeping through the night, stopped engaging with anything except those 2 objects, the carving and the fur. He'd go to the grove every day, sit in the empty space, wait for hours, then come back hollow. He was mourning, grieving a loss as real as Margaret's death had been for me. Maybe more real, because Margaret had been sick, expected. This was sudden, bewildering, a ripping away of the one connection that had made sense to him. I tried to explain, tried to show him on a calendar when spring might come, when the creature might return. But he didn't understand calendar time. He only understood now and not now, and his friend was not now. I watched my son suffer and couldn't help him because the only one who could help him was gone, and I had no idea if they'd ever come back. By February, I'd made the decision. We had to leave. This grove had become a shrine to grief instead of a place of connection. Staying was just prolonging Leo's suffering. I started packing, preparing to return to Seattle, to face whatever came next. That's when I found the tapes. Dozens of Betamax cassettes, hundreds of hours of footage of the most important friendship of my son's life. And I understood. This was the choice. Release them and change the world, or protect them and protect what they represented. There was never really a choice at all. I'm 83 years old and I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, maybe 3 months left. Leo is 48 now, living in a group home in Seattle with good staff who understand his needs. He never fully recovered from that winter. Never formed another connection like the one he had with the creature, but he survived. He learned to communicate using text-to-speech technology. He works part-time at a library, shelving books in perfect order, finding peace in the rhythm and routine. He's had a good life, different from what I might have hoped, but good, full, meaningful. And I owe all of it to a juvenile Bigfoot who saw my son and understood him in ways I never could. Here's what I learned. Intelligence isn't what we think it is. We measure it in test scores, degrees, technological achievement, but real intelligence is seeing another being's needs and adapting to meet them. It's communication without words. It's patience without expectation of reward. It's presence without agenda. That creature possessed emotional intelligence that surpassed most humans I've known. It read Leo's needs, adapted its behavior, provided exactly what Leo required without ever being told. Different doesn't mean deficient. Leo wasn't broken. He didn't need to be fixed or normalized or made more like typical children. He needed to be accepted exactly as he was, and given support that worked for his neurology, not mine. The creature understood that instinctively. I spent 10 years fighting it. Love isn't about possession or permanence. It's about being present for however long you have, giving what you can and trusting that the connection matters even when it ends. That creature loved my son. There's no other word for it. And when it had to leave, it gave Leo everything it could. Memories, skills, the knowledge that he was worthy of being seen and understood. Most importantly, some things are worth more as mysteries than as proof. I had evidence that would have changed science, made me famous, secured funding for decades of research, but releasing it would have destroyed the creatures, would have turned Leo's friend into a specimen, would have violated the trust of beings who'd chosen vulnerability and gotten protection in return. The choice was never really between science and secrecy. It was between exploitation and honor. I chose honor. I locked the tapes away and threw away the key. For 37 years I carried that secret, told no one. Let the scientific community think I'd wasted my sabbatical in the woods with my disabled son instead of changing our understanding of human evolution. And I'd make the same choice again, every time. Last week I gave Leo the combination to the safe, told him what was inside, what it meant, what choice he'd have to make. He spent 2 days watching the digitized footage. 2 days seeing his 10-year-old self with his friend, remembering what I thought he'd forgotten. When he came to visit me in hospice, he brought his text-to-speech device and typed out a message. I remember. All of it. Never forgot. Just couldn't talk about it because you can't sign grief to people who don't know the signs. The happiest time of my life. Thank you for protecting them. Thank you for keeping the secret. Then he told me what he'd done. He'd watched the footage one final time. Then he deleted the digital files and destroyed the physical tapes. Some things should only exist in the unmapped silence, he typed. Some friendships are too pure to be shared. They taught me love. That's proof enough. If you take anything from this story, take this. Not everything needs to be documented, proven, shared. Some experiences are sacred precisely because they remain private, protected, honored, instead of exploited. If you encounter something or someone extraordinary, something that defies categories, that challenges everything you think you know, your first question shouldn't be, how do I prove this? It should be, how do I protect this? Connection is worth more than proof. Love is worth more than validation. Honor is worth more than fame. I spent my career studying dead languages, trying to understand how humans communicated centuries ago. But I learned more about communication from watching my son and a juvenile Bigfoot invent their own language in a moss-covered grove than I learned in 30 years of academic research. Real communication isn't about words. It's about seeing someone, really seeing them, and adapting yourself to meet them where they are instead of demanding they meet you where you're comfortable. Subscribe if you believe some stories matter more than proof. If you understand that the most profound connections often happen in silence, away from cameras and documentation, and the need to make others believe. Comment below if you've ever had a connection that couldn't be explained, only honored. Share your story, or keep it sacred. Both are valid choices, and if you're a parent of a neurodivergent child, if you've struggled to understand someone whose brain works differently than yours, stop trying to fix them. Stop trying to make them more like typical people. Just watch them. Really watch them. See how they process the world, what brings them joy, what helps them regulate. Then adapt to them instead of demanding they adapt to you. That's what the creature did for Leo. That's what I should have done from the beginning. Somewhere in the Olympic Peninsula, there might still be a family of Bigfoot who remember a non-verbal human child who taught them signing, who remember the grove where two outcasts found perfect understanding. And somewhere in Seattle, there's a 48-year-old man with autism who types on a device to communicate, who works in a library, who keeps a carved cedar figure and a tuft of reddish-brown fur on his bedside table. Proof that the friendship was real. Proof that he was loved exactly as he was. Proof that different doesn't mean deficient. It just means different. That's all the proof anyone ever needed. The rest, the tapes, the footage, the evidence that could have changed science, it's gone now. Destroyed by the same person it was meant to protect. Because Leo understood what took me decades to learn. Some things are more valuable as memories than as monuments. Some love is too pure to survive public scrutiny. The forest keeps its secrets, and so do we.